will be, I know that Tyler is going to show up 30 minutes before. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll, it'll all work out. It'll all be okay. Hi guys, my name's Lucy. And I'm just going to be talking to you guys about creating safe environments for diverse students. Okay, so um, by the end of this presentation, I would like you guys to feel confident in your understanding of what diversity is, how you can create safe classrooms, and modeling your willingness to learn and engage. So diversity is kind of a state of being and being composed of different elements. So the kind of factors that we associate with being a part of diversity is race, ethnicity, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, religion, and socioeconomic class. So I kind of would like you to each like mentally just go through this list and identify like kind of where you fall on each of them. I think that it's important that we're aware of kind of where we fall on these things so that we're aware that people are different. So, um, now that we've identified like kind of who we are, where we fall, I want to kind of tackle like learning about the differences between us and other people. So, cultural competence occurs when students are taught to acknowledge and celebrate their own culture while learning to appreciate and understand the culture of others. So, this is a quote that's the foundation for critical race theory. And it's really important for you and your students to be able to understand, to identify their own cultures as well as others and not see their own culture as the default. So I was thinking that we could go around and kind of share something that you know where your culture is different from other cultures. So, for example, I feel like my personal culture, at least within my family and my area, um, is a little weird about food. And so my whole family is kind of obsessed with eating healthy. They're kind of like almond parents, if you guys know what that word means. They're just like really healthy and health conscious. And so we don't have a lot of sweets in the house at any point. So that's kind of how like um, my culture differs from their cultures. Um, Ready? Do you have any?
My my culture is kind of grounded in German American farmers. Both my parents are from the Midwest and come from farming families and farming communities. And my mother's family has been in the U.S. since the 1840s. So um, very committed to farming culture and working hard. So I think having that really incredible work ethic, um, which has its good sides and its bad sides. So I kind of fight with that a little bit. But it's a pretty strong expectation in our family that people work really hard.
Yeah, thank you. Kaylee?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if this is one. Just like within my family, while very been very much into like video games and stuff like that, is how we've always like I don't know, gotten along as like a family. Like my parents play World of Warcraft with each other, and we'll play that with my brother and things like that. So I kind of grew up with like a video game controller in my hand because that's like what we would do as a family. As a result, I think we are kind of very much into like folklore and other like fantasy things. And I know like my dad and my sister have kind of touched more into like our, we're very like Norwegian, like Scandinavians who kind of touch back into those roots and have gotten like tattoos that are like Nordic on them. And so they kind of touch back into that. So that's just kind of what popped into my mind.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Greg, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, my not add, but I mean, but yeah, my own so similar, I guess, to Freddie. My family's been in the US since I don't remember what year you said, but we came over in 1650. Um so German mainly. So I guess my culture kind of is revolves around um independence and like self-reliance and hard work. Also many people in my family happen to be entertainers, so entertainment and socializing and things like that are a huge part as well.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think that when we're able to kind of identify um, where our cultures come from, where our family stands, we're more easily able to see how we're different from other people and how um, and how that's important. Do you guys how do you think that understanding this, how do you think that diversity benefits our communities?
I think it's really cool to see what differences everybody has. I think if you come at it in the lens that difference isn't a bad thing, difference is okay, and we should celebrate how unique everybody is, and how different everybody is, then I think it can, diversity is like such an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, thank you.
What was can you repeat that question?
Oh yeah, I was just asking, how do you think that diversity benefits our communities?
Oh, sweet. Yeah. So I have been fortunate enough to travel a lot and to be involved in a whole bunch of different cultures, like living in them. And like before I even started doing that, I should say the change that happened within me was pretty significant after I started to see how other people live in different countries and that their cultures really opened my eyes to like I think a lot of people don't get that experience, maybe especially living in the area where we do. Some people I've met who've never even left like the region. So yeah, it just a perspective, like wow, there's more going on in the world than is happening in my circle. So
Yeah, it's definitely a unique thing that we have to be able to travel the world so easily and to be able to experience other cultures. And that's one of the benefits of globalization is that we're so much more able to engage with other people and engage in other cultures and to really appreciate the diversity and kind of, I think, almost question the things that happen with us and be like, oh, there are other ways to do this, maybe better ways. So I think that's also one of the benefits of diversity. Um, Ready?
Okay.
This is
So we want to talk a little bit about making your classroom a safe space. So what about that's important about having a safe classroom space?
I think having a safe classroom is important because um, in order for kids to learn, they have to feel safe. Learning and growing takes a lot of brain time and effort. And I think that when kids feel safe, they're more able to let more of their brain engage in the learning process.
Anyone else want to add anything?
No,
I
I think
remember as a kid, worrying about being judged if I answered a question wrong, or if I said something that sounded funny. and and it took me a long time, even through college or even through grad school, probably starting in grad school, decided it's okay if I share my ideas, but it took a long time to feel safe to be able to do that. I think there's a lot of factors that went into that, but definitely the culture and atmosphere that is created in a classroom helps facilitate that. helps kids to feel like they can talk, they can participate. It's okay. We seem to be having a bit of a technology glitch.
Yeah, let me get signed back in. I'm very sorry about this, guys.
That's okay.
Meanwhile, I have a question. And actually Lucy brought up something, I think it was you brought up something similar in the past about the terminology we use sometimes. I think it was about self-care. I think that was Lucy who was talking about how
Yeah.
it kind of gets thrown around, and I think you said you didn't like the term or something, but I'm curious. So we say this term, and there's stickers all over the high school I work at that say safe space. So like, what does it mean? You know, what does that mean exactly? And I guess I'm asking because I have ideas of what it maybe means, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I want to pass that on to everybody else before I answer. Do you guys think what does a safe space mean?
I think it's a space where you can not feel that you'll feel like it's okay to engage in some activity, whether it's talking or some other kind of behavior, where you're not worried about being hurt, either emotionally or physically, that you can interact with other people. And you may not necessarily agree with everyone there. There may be conflict, but conflict that is trying to work through what's different and how can we accept that, and not feel threatened, either emotionally or physically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that safe spaces are places where kids can feel like it's okay for them to make mistakes and there is no punishment because we as social workers understand that punishment doesn't actually change behavior. There are other ways to change behavior, but that they won't be punished, that they won't be shamed, that they won't be humiliated. We can't guarantee that they won't feel those things, but that we can help them feel safe in this space that we create. And safety, like Freddie says, often involves both like emotional safety, feeling safe to make mistakes, and also physical safety, like feeling like you're not going to get hit. Like when you I feel a part of safe spaces is being able to report bullying and being able to report physical assault, being believed, and having action taken. That's that's one of the things that I feel is part of this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious of the thoughts. Makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
I think one term that comes up often in this kind when we're talking about safety or bullying is the notion of civility, and really being able to accept that by nature we're different and we're going to potentially disagree, and to be able to do that in a way that does not attack another person, but accept that, okay, I might not agree with you, but your point of view is just as valid as my point of view. And maybe your behaviors are different than mine. And that's okay. I can accept that they're different than mine. And it doesn't mean bad, doesn't mean unacceptable, it just means different. So being able to understand and accept that without using that term as a way to control others. And I think that's the fine line that is very challenging to walk, because sometimes it's that terminology is used as a way to control others' behavior. and it's definitely a social construction. What is civil to one person may not be civil to another. So it's a difficult challenge. But I think we know when something's not civil. I think when it's hurtful, when it's painful, and then being able to have the protection, the safety to report that, to get some assistance in that situation. So as you think about the classroom situation, and we probably all have experienced the idea of bullying in the classroom. And it happens in so many different ways. And now, of course, we see this on the internet, in social media, and across those kinds of relationships. So what are some approaches that we can use in the classroom to limit those kinds of bullying behaviors? How can we create a safe space for our students?
I think unfortunately, like due to technology, especially, I mean, there's no way that you can 100% control that. But I guess I'm thinking of the general classroom because I don't work in a general classroom, so it would look different for me. But educating about different cultures, sort of as a if you were a teacher, so to sort of putting extra emphasis on like just modeling, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Modeling respect for different cultures. I don't know that. I mean, that could be maybe only thing you could do. I don't know, because kids are gonna be kids, kids are gonna be texting and doing things on social media, but I think kids follow the models of adults around them, especially as they're younger and growing up. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Going off of what Craig said, I think modeling is so important, especially as we're adults in the classroom. I think the students definitely look up to us for how to behave in different situations. So I think it could even boil down to like how you handle a conflict that happens in the classroom, how you handle if there's a student that's like on their phones or something. Just the way that you go about that can make a big difference in how the students in your classroom learn how to handle conflicts. So.
Lucy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, if you're looking for a segue, one of
That'd be
my
lovely.
one of my favorite tactics for kind of limiting unhelpful conflict in classrooms or in groups in general is the creation of group rules. So
Many of you have experienced this in classrooms that maybe you've been in college, where the instructor suggests some rules for the classroom, or if you've had a group practice class where you've had to consider developing group rules so that you all can accomplish your task and do what you need to do. I think, and we'll kind of go over this, but it's usually most effective if the entire group is involved in making the rules. If you come in there with a set of rules and say, these are the rules, there's not that much buy-in often. I mean, there might be some people that will buy into that, but some people that might feel left out. So it's really important that everybody has an investment in whatever the rules are in creating the kind of classroom space or group space that you want to have. So there's lots of ways of doing this. You can brainstorm. kind of get a whole bunch of crazy ideas out there using the chalkboard or flip charts or whiteboard. But there's lots of different ways that you can kind of brainstorm and get ideas out there and either vote on them, or people can throw something out and people can agree or not agree with that kind of rule. So there's a lot of different processes that you can create. But I think it's good to get a sense from the members of the group, whether that's a classroom or a therapy group. Why do we need rules? What's important about that? And what do they need as individuals? What kinds of rules or controls or limits do they need so that they can feel safe in that space? They can feel like they can contribute and they can be part of the group and they can be included. So you want to have a good conversation with the students so that you feel like you have a good understanding that they know why we have rules, why that's important. And I think kids are really good at making up their own games. And when they make up their own games, they always make up rules. Sometimes they change the rules as they go. But that concept of rules, I think, starts really early in their development. So it's pretty easy to engage them in that process and help them to be part of making that decision. And I think that can be really empowering. I mean, we see that on the playground, kids making up rules for their games, and sometimes they're exclusive, sometimes they're inclusive. But helping them to really think critically about that, start to consider how does that impact other people. And the other thing I think that's really important about our rules is it's inevitable that somebody will break the rules. No matter what, it's inevitable. Whether it's a mistake or intentional, it will happen. So we need to have a process for being able to resolve conflict. And basically, all of our laws, all of our policies that we develop as adults, it's just the rules. It's just the rules for existing together. And then if someone breaks them, how do we deal with that? Having a process. So one of the things I like to encourage, is not always possible, but I like to encourage is creating rules in a way that are positive. So it expresses what you want people to do rather than what you don't want them to do. And sometimes it's difficult to leave that part out. Sometimes you need that side of the equation. But when possible, I like to frame things in a positive format. So I have a couple of examples here. So rather than saying, don't call people names or names that they don't like, what you want them to do is call each other by their preferred names, whatever that might be, but to respect what our individual wishes are. So then I put the other one up there that's in orange to see if I could get some ideas from you how we might potentially turn that around to be more positive or to have a positive frame that doesn't use the word not. So I'm open to your suggestions. Anyone?
Haley, you look like you want to say something. I'm gonna call on you.
No, that's a hard one that I was debating. How do you use it? Do we want to use honesty to build people up, to support people? Potentially, it might be one.
Both of those sound good. Yeah.
Craig, do you have an idea?
I don't really understand what you're saying. So turn
it around so you don't have to use the word not. What do you want people to do rather than not do? So I guess I could, as an example, something that might be hurtful. Maybe you have a child that is overweight in the classroom, and another kid says, "You're fat," which is not necessarily, in the grand scheme of things, an untrue statement. It could be considered honest, but it also can be considered quite hurtful.
Mm. Yeah, I don't immediately have something. I have to think about it. I
So
see what you're saying.
yeah. So one thing I thought about was, and Lucy, I want to know what you think too. We'll only give feedback or opinions to others when requested.
Ooh. It's a little, depending on the age group, it might be a little bit
Right.
much, but
Exactly.
I like it. I think one of the reasons why I put this on the slide was um, when Kaylee was working at Bannock House and I was trying to be supportive, I feel, and in my own experiences with kids, I feel like a lot of them say things and then they're like, "What? I'm just being honest. Being honest is good. It's right." And so that's kind of the basis for where this kind of like idea comes from. But I do believe that what you're saying, we will not give feedback unless it is asked for, unless like I do think that that would also work just as good. Thank you.
And then I had one other one. I think you had something else in a note about inclusion, about not excluding kids,
Mhm.
which can be um, often happens. Kids are often excluded. Having been the victim of that particular activity as a small child. So I was thinking of, we'll include other students in our groups or games when requested. Because kids don't always think to do that, but if somebody says, "Can I join your game?" or a teacher says, "Why don't you join this group?" then it gives them the message that we want to include people. We're not going to say, "No, you can't play with us." Other thoughts about group rules and establishing group rules?
I was going to say that I feel like this isn't realistic for every classroom, and that this is kind of the ideal. And I think that maybe a more realistic version of this is coming in with your rules, your list of rules, and saying, how do you guys feel about these? Do you guys feel that they are fair, that they're accurate? Do you guys understand what each of the words means? Do you know what will happen when you break them? As much as getting their buy-in and letting them help you craft rules is really a great experience for them. I want to acknowledge that that's not always realistic for every classroom. So just do your best and try and get them involved in that process. And I think that that's a great way to help just to help handle disruptive behaviors in the classroom.
I have actually seen this work even with like preschool and kindergarten classes, where it's not easy. You get some crazy ideas sometimes, but it does engage kids in that process of developing rules and figuring out how do we get along with each other? How do we create a safe space?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Lucy.
thank you. So I kind of wanted to go over some of the basics, just generally, when a student approaches you with a problem kind of regarding their diversity, say they're being bullied for their race or they're kind of having interesting feelings about their gender orientation, a great kind of key to do is to ask questions, make sure that you reflect their feelings and thoughts back to them, sympathize and empathize where possible. Um, if a Mexican student comes up to me and says, people are bullying me because I'm Mexican, I'm not going to say, I totally understand, because I don't. But I am going to try and utilize other ways to show my understanding. So I think it's important to sympathize and empathize where appropriate, and then empower them and ask how they want this problem to be solved, and kind of assist them with some ideas of what support and solutions can look like. So in my case about a Mexican student being bullied, I think one way that you could empower them or offer solutions is you could say, would you like me to hand this over to the principal? Would you like me to talk to the student? Or would you like help role playing how to approach the student and handle the conflict on your own? How do you want me to support you? I think that these are great ways to support and listen to students. So I have some practice prompts. Oh, Craig, what's up?
I was just going to add something to that last slide. This actually happened to me at the middle school, essentially last year. I don't know why I was the one who was chosen, but I was. And a student came up and was expressing, I think that she was being bullied because she was attracted to girls or something like that. And yeah, I mean, like my immediate reaction actually was to be like, that's so awesome. Like, it's great that you were able to tell me that. Like, just being able to communicate that with an adult is so, I mean, I think brave is another term that is maybe overused, and but brave, you know what I mean? Like, it's I wanted to just like give her a hug, even though I can't do that, but and be like, awesome, good for you. And then all those other things too. But I was like excited in a way, even though she was experiencing pain, that it came out and said that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Being able to say like you're so brave for coming up and talking to an adult about this. Thank you for asking for help. Yeah, Craig, those things are definitely, can't believe I forgot them. Those things are definitely like great things to do and engage with. So I do have some a kind of prompt to discuss. So Chris Brooke is a student on the football team. This is actually kind of similar to what Craig was talking about, but who gets really good grades and is very social. Lately, uh, he's become more and more withdrawn in the classroom, and you've seen him get into heated conversations with other students. If you're gently asking him about this, he nervously tells you that his team has discovered that he's gay, and it's affecting his ability to play and participate in class. So during this for the situation, how would you react? How would you help the student?
I think just mixing what you and Craig said, thank the student for trusting you with that information, and then you can ask and see where he wants to go from there. If he wants to take it to the principal, if you would like to talk about some ways that he could talk to the other students, just different things like that, like brainstorming solutions with him, I think would be really good.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Haley, I know you just got here. Do you have anything to add to this, or are you caught up?
Yes, I'm sorry.
You're
It's been a
good.
rough morning. I would say, okay, I missed what's happened previously, so I apologize if I'm being redundant, but I would definitely pull him aside and check in with him like after class, after kids had, left, and see if there's making connections with like the school counselor. And it just kind of depends on my level of relation with the kid too. Because if I knew him well, that would determine how I deal with him. But if I don't know him very well, I'm probably going to ask him permission to discuss it with somebody who did know him well, maybe like the football coach, or, see who he had relationships with first. But if I was his trusted adult, I would definitely go toward the counselor, and also see what his relationship is with his parents, and see if he had talked to his parents as well. So I think there's a couple of different avenues. I would check in with him, and then, make sure that it didn't just get left hanging, but follow up in like a couple of days.
Yeah, Definitely. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, that's another great thing to do, along with the other things that I mentioned, is to help them connect with resources and kind of be a bit of a broker for them and connect them to the like talk to the football coach about it and talk to the school counselor about it. Yeah, thank you, Haley. Uh,
I think
ready?
one thing that I think is important is making sure that your overall environment is accepting of diversity overtly, explicitly. So creating some a culture within the school that is very accepting and open for diversity, whether that's having a variety of different student clubs, posters, different kinds of celebrations on a regular basis. A million years ago, when I was first a social work student, we did a field trip to a school in Tacoma, and you walked into that school and it just radiated diversity and celebrating diversity. And it was such an uplifting experience to be in that kind of environment where there was intentionality about really celebrating and accepting and welcoming everyone. It was a very low income school. I think kind of situated in the midst of a public housing project. And it was just so fun and lively and inviting to be there. And so to be able to create that kind of environment that says you are included, you are part of this culture, of this community, and being very explicit about that. I think that can help, sort of an indirect way of creating some of those group rules.
Ooh, can I jump in on that? My school, I'm actually at my school right now, so I can show you, but our school in the last couple of years is finally starting to like put things on the walls, even though it's been open for like 23 years. And so my neighbor friend and I, we got with the Kind Community in Pocatello, and she got us some of these signs. I'll show you that we've hung up. And I don't know if you can see. Oh, how do I take my filter off? No filter. Okay. So we have like in English and Spanish, and then there's the other one. And then we also have a couple of these posters that have just recently showed up. I kind of think that these people are AI'd, but I don't think they're real human. But anyway, we have some of those posters that have been put up around the hallways to kind of inspire inclusivity. And I think I don't know, it at least has color on our walls now. So whether it actually is doing its job on making kids feel like they're included, it makes me happy. And so hopefully it's passing on to them.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. I think that what Freddie said was entirely right. Like I remember one of my government teachers had the pride flag in her room, and that made me feel so safe and like I could talk to her about anything and like I could be open. And yeah, I think that what you do have in your environment really does matter. And there are some clues and signals that you can give to diverse students that this is a safe space that you can talk to us in. So this is another one, and it's a bit more difficult. So Maria Lopez is an amazing student in your class who gets good grades and always participates in class discussions. But you've noticed that she's not participating in class as much and seeming tired. Her grades have dropped a full letter. After asking her about it, she tells you that her parents have started working more and she's had to spend more time cooking. Um, there's this there we go. And caring for her siblings in the household, which has left her with no time to do the signed readings and get sleep. So how would you support this student?
I'll jump in again. I'm sorry. This actually happened to me this last week. I have a student who she has 3 younger siblings, and she came to me one morning and she was like 10 minutes late. She goes, "Please don't mark me tardy." We all slept in, and I had to drop my siblings off to school, and I was like, "Well, where are your parents?" And she's like, "Well, my mom has to be to work at 5 and my dad has to be to work at 6." And she's the oldest one of the bunch, and so it's her responsibility to get all the kids out of bed and get them ready for school. And I was like, "Don't worry, I won't mark you tardy. Let's work on alarms. Let's get them set up," and then kind of help her work on her responsibilities as an adult because she's going to be a senior, and kind of tie it to like how this is how life is going to be when you have a job and when you're a mom, and you're ahead of the game. And congratulated her and making it to school. Even, I mean, she's here almost every single day. And then a week later, she's like, I was late again because I got here and realized it was garbage day and I forgot to take the trash out. And I was just like, as an 18-year-old, this girl she's got so much responsibility on her shoulders. And so I try to commend them for the added responsibility besides the ones that the other kids have where they come home and mom and dad are at home, and then flex with them on assignment deadlines and stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. Craig?
Yeah, I love that. I do this with my clients as well. I think as adults, especially, we can sort of we understand that high school or middle school or whatever, honestly, okay, maybe I'm just speaking for me, but like I don't remember anything from that time, right? I don't remember almost anything that I learned. So is it that important? Not really. Like to me, in the grand scheme of my life, not important. So not that we should say that to kids, but I think having that perspective and being like, you know, you're doing like you're doing, I guess, just sort of rebalancing the scales a little bit as we approach kids who are doing that kind of stuff, because really those are, like you said, what's your name, Haley, like those are life responsibilities, and being like, oh, you're going to be so good at this when you're older, and that's really supporting those things, because I think a kid could very easily feel like they're failing, because they're not doing what seems to be the most important thing, like showing up to math class on time or whatever, which really does not matter. When you're laying on your deathbed, you're gonna be like, I didn't come to math on time. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, I try to reframe perspectives in a healthy way too, because school matters. Yeah, but supporting those things, I think, and commending them for doing them all is important. So.
Yeah, and definitely something that I thought about when putting together this presentation was making sure that these kinds of students were good students so that we could focus on like what our main reaction, our best reaction is. Because I feel like when you have this same situation with a student who maybe doesn't have as amazing of grades and maybe is struggling, and this is the reason why, I think it's a little bit more difficult to deal with it because like Craig was saying, this isn't the biggest part of the biggest point of your life. And if you were going to pass and get your diploma, it really does not matter. But if they're not, and we as people who appreciate education want them to get the diploma, we want them to get the GED, we want them to be educated, I think it makes it a lot more difficult for us to stand by and let them do this. And I think that is maybe something that we should challenge in ourselves. Um, Asking them like, what can we do to support you? I was also going to mention that oldest siblings typically experience a lot of parentification, which means that they are being treated like parents and they're not being treated like kids. And oftentimes that doesn't give them time or space to be able to appreciate their own childhood and their own lives. And I totally understand what Haley was saying with this is going to be your responsibility soon. But I think that we should also take into mind and question and kind of hold space for the fact that this is actually not her responsibility. It was never supposed to be her responsibility. And the fact that this is her responsibility now because of things outside of the family's control, like her parents can't do that. Her parents have to go to work by 5 and by 6, so she has to do this. So I think understanding that this is a hard thing and that this can really damage people's abilities to understand and like to appreciate their education. So that's my 2 cents. Does anybody else have anything to add about this before we move on?
People have to make choices about what's urgent and important and focus their energies there. And we want kids to be able to enjoy their childhood and get the full benefit of public education. But sometimes the reality is they have many other responsibilities as well, as do their parents. That's just the nature of life, the nature of privilege in this country, the limit of resources that we have available. So to the extent possible, as educators, if we can understand those differences, and do our part to provide a bit more equity, not necessarily equality, but equity for our students, to help bolster those that don't have the same kind of privilege and resources as some other students do, to help them achieve their goals. And they may just take a different path, and that path may not be the one that we would choose, but it's one that works for them at this point in time. And that's really accepting and celebrating their diversity.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. I think that what you were saying about the different paths really works well with what Haley and Craig were saying, where Craig was like, this doesn't have to be your ideal. This doesn't have to be your goal is to get perfect grades and to go on to college. Like this doesn't have to be your goal. You can have a goal to pass and then to do oh my gosh, like specialized training schools, forget what they're called. But yeah, and then what Haley was saying is this can really build you up for a life as a mom, for your future as an adult. And so I think that we should just really respect what client, the student would like and what they're kind of struggling with. So thank you guys for participating. So something that I've noticed when talking about diversity is there's kind of a desire to not hurt anybody's feelings. But this culture of silence and perfectionism can prevent us from making any mistakes and therefore not like learning. So how can we tell the people around us that they've said something harmful in a way that encourages learning?
I think, and this is just what's like first come to mind. I really like using I statements. I feel like I statements are very effective whenever there's conflict. And I think it can help other people get less defensive and really listen to what their needs are and what's happening in the conversation as a whole. And so if it's like me, someone says something hurtful to me, like, hey, I felt really X when you said Y comments. Um, is there a way that, and then you probably problem solve, like, is there a way that we can, I don't know, change that? Yeah, just stuff like that. I felt this way when this happened. I feel like is effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I statements are a great way to avoid the other person act when they're done correctly. I think that there are some people who misuse I statements, but I think everybody here, if anybody here doesn't understand I statements, speak now or forever hold your peace. Um, but yeah, so one of my tips is kind of doing constructive criticism. So commenting on things that people have the ability to fix. So people's actions or people's words and not who they are as a person. So instead of saying you are racist, say you said something that was kind of racist. Not even kind of, you said something that was racist. Um, and I think that sometimes these things can still kind of dig at people, and it's partially because of that. Um, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I might as well. Because of cancel culture and because of how hard we are on other people nowadays, especially within social media, the fact that things that we say are often permanent, I think that it's really important for us to acknowledge and recognize that just because somebody said something once doesn't mean that that's who they are or how they feel. And so if we can give people the grace and understanding and kind of confront them about this in a loving way. I think that's the best way to create safer spaces for our students, especially when there are teachers or other people in the staff who maybe uh, aren't as educated or don't appreciate diversity as well as much as we do. Um,
Lucy, I want to jump in on that too. I think that one of the things that we have to remember is like to not withhold or like, because I'm a pretty blunt person. I'm a pretty straightforward person, and I wouldn't consider myself like aggressive or like confrontational, but I'm also not the person who's going to stand on the wayside and like let it slide. And
mhm.
so I think I like what Kaylee said about the I statements. I think those are really important, but I think it's also important to recognize that like if I say something inappropriate, like not just like publicly say I shouldn't have said that, I apologize, that was not okay. Or like if I hear a student say something, I'm going to say to the kid, pull them aside as well and say, hey, how would you feel? Or kind of flip the tables back on them and say, I want you to think about this from their situation. Or you don't know what's happening inside their brain and inside their home. And so just changing the perspective of the kid and allowing the kid to see like, oh, we all live in our own little bubbles until someone stops us and says like, hey, think about it from Julie's standpoint. How would you feel if you were Julie? you know
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that's entirely really like, yes, 100%.
One of
So
the things I like to do also in that situation is ask for clarification. Something like, can you help me understand what you meant by that? Just being curious and being open to getting more information.
yeah, yeah, I do think that that's also a great way to combat people who do say things that might be inappropriate, is saying, can you help me understand what you meant by that? Why is this funny to you? Explain it to me. I think that there are a lot of ways that that can be perceived as a more gentle, non-confrontive, confrontative approach to this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting. Thinking about it from me, I tend to be a person who really would definitely do that, what Freddie said, because I'm just imagining a scenario where like, I don't know, somebody says something blatantly racist to another person. Um, in my mind, I'm like, I mean, I can obviously tell it's inappropriate, but like, okay, there's got to be something deeper than that, you know? So if you were thinking of an clinical counseling setting or a time when you have enough time with a person to really discover what that is, like obviously that means something to them, and that person is a person too, the person who's, even though they said something discriminatory or whatever, like, yeah, I think that takes a lot of time sometimes to really like
yeah,
unpack that though. And but I think spending time with a person to unpack it or to understand it, um like for the person themselves could like change their life, could mean everything, where maybe it's all based on nobody ever caring what they think or whatever, so I think that's definitely important. I agree.
yeah, yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. I think that there are a lot of aspects of discriminatory beliefs or behaviors that are definitely rooted in past traumas, or kind of systemic inequalities. Kaylee and I actually were having a conversation about, while I was putting together this presentation, we were wondering if it was like racist or bad for us to be afraid of Black men. And that is a really like uh, huge topic that I won't be addressing as much here, but there are sometimes valid reasons for us to be scared or afraid or have beliefs that might hurt people, but it's not okay for us to act that way, to publicly hurt people's feelings or to hurt others or to advocate against those people. We have every right to feel the way that we do feel, even if it might not be politically correct. But we should also still be held to the same standards as other people in terms of what we do, what we say, kind of things. So in this kind of slide, I talked a little bit about how we can approach others, but I think it's also important to kind of think about how we can respond when somebody says something to us about something that we might have said. So I think that children are sponges and they absorb everything that we tell them, but more importantly, they absorb everything that we do. And so I think that when we refuse to be wrong, or when we kind of defend ourselves or get defensive, we kind of model a fixed mindset and a stubborn behavior to them. And it's not going to benefit the child long term. And it's also often ineffective and tiresome for us to continuously to be defensive and to deflect. And so I was wondering how you guys feel like you react, or how you want to react when somebody tells you that you did something discriminatory, if you have an experience of when this happened, and how you react.
I think it depends on how they tell you that, because it's easy to be like, it's easy to be like, hey, you idiot, you did this thing, you know, you can't do that, you know, and then of course it's like, well, that will get one reaction, you know.
Mhm.
I think yeah, so it depends how you say it. That's all I got so far. I haven't thought through the whole thing.
Sure, that's a hard question, Lucy.
Yeah, it is a
And
hard question.
I think it's one of those things where we have to recognize that we make mistakes too, and acknowledge the student or maybe coworker, and express appreciation for for them pointing it out, because it might be something that you didn't realize was hurtful. Again, because we don't know what's happening in other people's lives, and so it could be something minor. I think the other thing we have to, like, again, it's modeling, just how you said, it's modeling. We have kids, they're high schoolers, or like my kids are in middle school right now, and there's comments that you hear amongst their friends about, they might be derogatory towards sexuality or gender preferences. They might be like, an expression that they use that drives me crazy is when they're like, oh, that's so sped. And I'm like, that is not okay. That, you cannot, you can't say that. And then a lot of times it's just, they hear that being said and they're like, well, nobody else made a reaction to it, so I guess it's okay to say. And so I think if people come to us and say that we did something hurtful, it might be bring to light like, oh, I never thought about that, or I apologize, and it gives us an opportunity to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the discussion part is really important, and that's how we learn. That's what the growth mindset is about. So yeah, so there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, and that making mistakes is how we learn. Often we learn better when we make mistakes. Um, so, and like Haley said, like ask questions. Um, Say like, help me understand how this was harmful. Like talk to me about this. Have a conversation with me. Apologize with sincerity. And sometimes you're going to say something and someone's going to be like, hey, you said this thing and it hurt my feelings. And you're not going to be able to apologize sincerely for a week or a month. And that's okay. It's okay to take your time to figure out like why exactly what you did was wrong or why you did it, and to take the time to figure it out. Because I think that people would rather get a sincere apology and one that is curious and ready for conversation, rather than a defensive shutdown. Shame on me, I made a mistake, I feel so awful and bad. I think people would rather have an apology that is sincere and rational instead of shameful or prideful. And then also talking to them about how you're going to avoid making the mistake again in the future. Sometimes this is kind of implied and you don't have to talk about it. Um, a lot of people do misgender me. I use they them pronouns typically, but I understand that's not like super accessible for all people. But a lot of times it's implied. When people call me she, her, they're like, oh, sorry, them, and it's implied that they are going to try to not make that mistake again. Um, so, does anybody else have anything to say regarding this?
I think that for some people, okay, how do I say what I want to say? I should say for some things and for some people on some topics, there may not be like a resolution of just like, oops, my bad. Yeah, you're right. Some people will stick to what they think, and which might be the opposite of what the other person thinks. And I think the mature person, if that situation does arise, should at least, I think an apology could be necessary, but there may not be like a resolution of differences. Does that make sense? I think those things can exist together. I'm struggling to think of a specific example, but that just comes to mind. Like, I don't agree with you, but I'm sorry that I did this thing, right? And so yeah, I think that can happen sometimes.
I agree with that as well, because, and I think a lot of that is generational. I think a lot of that, especially when we're working with kids, it's not necessarily a reflection of the kid themselves, because I think as we grow up and as we learn more and as we're exposed to more and we experience more education and become, more culturally or aware of our surroundings, um, you kind of have to see that kid, eh, those biases and those beliefs are very deep. And I think you would just call that agree to disagree, and hopefully do it effectively and cordially so that you can continue to work forward. Knowing, I mean, it's just like politics. People, with politics are so deeply Republican or so deeply Democrat that you're either a liberal or you're a conservative, and there's no middle ground, and you're just going to have to agree to disagree on some things. And that's okay, because you have to learn how to work with other people.
I think with that too, kind of depend on the relationship that you have with whoever it is. So, like if it's a student or like for me, it's a client, like that, of course, that's not really something that I feel the need to, I don't know. I think it depends. Like if it's like a friendship, then it's like, is this something that's very harmful to me that I need to set a boundary with? I think it really depends. Yeah. But I agree with what Craig and Haley are saying about like sometimes it's okay for people to have differences. I think it really depends on the scenario and who it is and what the topic is. And yeah, I think in that case, it's just really important to look at your values, look at the relationship. I think there's so many different things that come into play there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I actually believe that some of the most valuable relationships that I have are the ones with people who don't agree with me on a lot of things. And it takes a level of maturity, like I said, and willingness, but I think that's how we learn, that's how we flourish, that's how we can change ideas and keep things fresh and stuff. So I think some in some ways, that's being lost in certain aspects of our culture today. So that's something that I try to put high value on in my life, because it means a lot, to learn from someone who doesn't agree with you.
yeah, definitely. I think that's a valuable part of diversity is that it is the diversity in thought. I would like to say though that regarding this and our role as mental health professionals or teachers or school staff is that uh, we have to do the least amount of harm, and we don't want to hurt anybody. And so we can agree to disagree on a lot of things, but when it comes to our roles, our responsibilities, and the way to keep our schools safe and our safe spaces, there are things that we can't disagree on. Like, for example, like Black people shouldn't be discriminated against. gay people deserve rights. There are certain things that there is no disagreement on. And I feel very strongly about that. But with other things, we can definitely agree to disagree. And I think I agree with Craig, that's being lost in some aspects in our culture because of the extremities, the radicalization. But I do want to reaffirm that I think that something that's more important than our opinions is keeping kids safe and making people feel included. I think that's more important than our opinions.
I think social media has often created these echo chambers where you can continually be reinforced for your ideas by other people that you're communicating with, to the extent that other ideas are excluded and you're not even exposed to some of those other ideas. And then when you're challenged on that, all you have to pull from are these voices that are disagreeing with that, and you don't have the opportunity to really critically examine those other thoughts. And so there, I guess that's one of the benefits of connection and being with a wide variety of people from diverse backgrounds is that you do have that exposure outside of that echo chamber, and you can consider other perspectives. You can consider a different perspective and different idea.
Freddie, I'm glad you point that out. Gosh, I'm sorry, guys. I feel like I don't mean to overspeak, but I think I've spoken about this before. Like, kids don't realize the impact that social media has on their lives. Like, they're like, oh, I just got 50 snaps, or my snap score is this today, or or this is how many streaks I have. They don't really pay attention to the feed and what they're seeing and what they're not seeing, and the algorithms and how those are built. And we kind of talked about this before with the social media discussion, but in my stress management class, I have them watch the docufilm, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix. And it basically talks about how you are, like, your feed is built particularly to what you see. And then outside of that, it's irrelevant to them. Like, the kids don't even realize. And so I think forward teaching that to them and helping them understand that what they're seeing is not necessarily reality it's really important, because otherwise they don't know. It's on the internet. It's true. That's what I saw.
Definitely. Thank you for contributing to that, Freddie and Haley. I do think that the algorithms online they can definitely really be harmful to our ability to understand that other opinions exist. I know that for me particularly, I recently, a year or so ago, got into a band called BTS. And they're Korean, and I feel like I see them everywhere, and I feel like they're in the media everywhere, and their songs are hitting #1. And then I talk to my grandparents, they're like, "Who is this band?" And I'm like, "Have you not like seen them on Facebook or on social media?" And it's because it's my Facebook and social media that I'm on. So it's a kind of harmless thing for me, but it was definitely a little bit of a weird thing, because the thing that had been consuming my brain for the last year or so, what they weren't even aware of. So I feel like that could definitely be harmful for other students who are consumed with things that might not be good for their mental health, and they think that everybody else is aware of it, but it's only being shown to them. So we're going to do another two, just like, how would you respond to this criticism, to this scenario? So I can't see my screen very well. So Kaylee, could you read this out loud for me, please?
Sorry, I was making all the other people smaller so I could read it. If
Thank
that
you.
makes any sense.
Yes.
In today's class, there was a debate about immigration, and several students said things like, I think illegal immigrants should be sent back to their country. You invited one of your only Latino students to comment, since the subject directly influences them, and the student refuses in a polite way, stating that they have nothing to add. After class, the student comes up to you and tells you that the debate made them uncomfortable.
How would you respond to this student?
I personally, I don't know how I would respond necessarily, but I think it's totally okay if that's something like they don't have to educate somebody else on it if they don't feel comfortable doing so. And so I think it's completely okay for the student to stand up and be like, hey, that made me uncomfortable. I would not like to be singled out in the future. And I think it would be amazing to respond and like, thank you for letting me know and apologizing for doing that and working to be better about not doing that in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand that just because that's how this student feels about it doesn't mean that's how every student will feel about it. So respecting that this is this student's preferences is probably something that will be good. Haley, you had something to add, I think?
Yeah, I think that would that question that goes back to like what the teacher's question was. That's a hard question to ask, and it sounds like you're going to open up a can of worms on that one. So I would maybe talk to the teacher first, say, "Hey, revise your questioning." But I do think that you also have to, like, you singled that kid out. You know, that kid get that. I can see how that kid would feel singled out, and I also think that's one of those things where you don't know what's going on in that kid's family, and like me being that kid, I would feel singled out. And so I think that would be something that would be a very difficult situation to mediate on the fly in class. And
Yeah.
I've actually come across this a couple years ago. We watched a documentary about some kids who immigrate from Central America, riding La Bestia, making their way, like the train that comes through Mexico to get to the north, and it triggered some really interesting discussion. But it was a wild topic, and I was like, okay, I probably am going to have to practice this one before I do this again because this was not what I wanted to have happen. And it wasn't like a train, no pun intended, train wreck, but it was like uh I probably would ask a mentor, or see some, see if there's another teacher who has guided a discussion like that too. Because I think that's more proactive rather than reactive. That scenario that you've created, that's a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Apology, definitely apology.
I think the idea of being proactive is really important in this context. If you're going to raise a very controversial topic in your class and you want to engage students, then thinking ahead of time as to how you can prepare them for that kind of discussion, and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate and not single kids out, especially on the fly, who are not who don't know that they're going to be singled out, because of their background. And we know that this happens all the time, but giving them an opportunity to prepare. So if you're going to do a debate about a controversial issue, make sure the class is divided in two, and one group gets one side and one group gets the other side, and it's relatively random, and you can have that discussion, and then teach them how to engage, in critical debate and consider these kind of controversial issues, based on evidence and a more, for lack of a better term, civil discourse.
I think that's a great term. And I also think it could be like the way you frame it, but also the method of discussion. So if it was like Tyler's sticky note thing that he did the other, like a couple presentations ago, where it's kind of an anonymous post. And I think as long as you frame it with the idea of respect being like the underlying, but I mean, the bottom line, that you're respectful in that kind of discussion, and that if you can reply anonymously, that is a way that it can open up kids who wouldn't normally participate in the discussion to feel a little bit more likely to participate or contribute in some way.
Yeah. I wanted to thank Haley for showing a great response to like being able to reflect on something that you did and be able to say like, oh, maybe I should get some more advice. Maybe I should think a bit more about this topic before I do it again. I think that was really brave of you to share that with us, and And I think that sometimes we have great intentions and we want to talk about and bring light and awareness to important things. And sometimes we're just a bit short-sighted in what that looks like or what kind of effect that can have. And that doesn't make us bad people. That doesn't mean that we did anything like wrong necessarily or bad or but I do think that you guys are right, like apologizing, maybe next time preparing a bit better and not singling out the student. Yeah, I think all of your suggestions are great. My next one, Freddie, could you read this one for me?
Of course. On the first day of school, a student named Jordan introduces themselves as using they, them pronouns. You don't really understand, and students seem to be in a similar situation, so you and other students use alternate pronouns for them. After a week or so, the school counselor comes to talk to you about Jordan and asks you to use the correct pronouns, they, them, and to correct other students when they misgender Jordan.
How would we handle this situation?
I think we're all really continuing to struggle with this transition and to really acknowledge that and to apologize. I mean, sort of like when we were talking about the group rules and really respecting what people are requesting of us. Even if we don't understand, that's okay. It's okay that we don't understand or that we're not comfortable with that. But to respond in a way that's preferred by the person because that really demonstrates respect. And just because it's not your norm, being able to let go of that or apologize when you forget. And because it is dismissive. It might feel dismissive, and we have to have some kindness and compassion for ourselves, but also kindness and compassion and respect for others.
Yeah, thank you. Haley, do you have anything to add?
I wish I did, but I kind of think that Freddie like hit the nail on the head. Honestly, I know that's kind of like a cop out, but
No.
I think she did a really good job summarizing what would be a good thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's okay to ask for help and assistance and understanding if that's really important to you. I've taken the opportunity to explain to people singular they, them pronouns for many a time in my life. And especially for older people, it's really difficult for them to understand because they've been taught plural they, them. And so having some compassion for older people and for younger people who don't exactly understand how to do this, but also kind of pushing them to especially because transgender and gender nonconforming students and adults are one of the highest risk for suicide, and using the correct pronouns is suicide prevention. And I think it's really important that we put the safety, like I was talking about earlier, that we put the safety of students above our comfort and our opinions, and um, that we like work hard for them to make sure that we're making them feel safe.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because that's something like in my school, we're really small, and a situation like this has only occurred maybe like a handful of times. And so, how, like, if, like, for me as a teacher and for my students, would it be appropriate to ask, um, like, the student aside, to be able to explain to the kids, or ask the counselor to come and visit and ask the student to, be excused when the counselor visits with them? I know, like, how would you be able to teach that to a group of kids to create more understanding?
Yeah, I think that really depends on the age group of
Mm-hmm.
kids. The way that I typically explain like why it's a valid singular pronoun is if you were at a party and somebody left their pen, you would go to your friend and you would say, hey, do you know whose pen this is? Can you give it back to them? Them being a singular person who has a singular pen, but you don't know their gender, so you would say, can you give it to them? That's how I explain like the grammatical validity of singular they them. But I'm not quite sure. I think that my advice in that situation would probably be to uh, take the student out of class, preferably, and then to have a counselor or you try and explain, answer questions, help them understand. I wouldn't want them to feel excluded or outed or specifically picked on. So if they were in there, they'd be like, oh, you guys are having this conversation because of me. You guys are having this conversation because I'm here. And I think that can kind of create feeling like a burden in some instances. I specifically sometimes don't use they them pronouns in certain situations because I don't want people to have to go through the extra effort of remembering my pronouns. Because I understand that it sometimes can feel like a burden to other people. Freddie, did you have something you wanted to add? You looked like
Yeah,
you wanted to say something.
I think we have to model again, coming back to that idea of modeling. So, and this, I mean, it's an emerging approach. So being conscious, being intentional. And so on the first day of class, when people are introducing themselves, setting the norm, using your own pronouns and asking students if they're comfortable to be able to share their pronouns when they introduce themselves. When you're, introducing people in a meeting, asking them to share their pronouns. I worked on the transition report for our new president at ISU and wanted to have some statement about that in the introduction of who participated in the report, in developing the report, and include their pronouns. And there were a lot of people sitting at the table that really didn't understand why that was important. And it's important for a lot of reasons. One, for all the things that Lucy has mentioned, but really just promoting respect and allowing people to be who they are and respect who they are and how they identify. And that there are lots of options, which is kind of cool. And to really respect that. And then we have to try to teach kids in that situation. So we're not singling people out. So it doesn't become a special thing. It becomes the norm, and we have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Freddie. I think that the starting somewhere, though, can be a little difficult, especially when you have rural area children who are growing up with mostly a Protestant Christian perspective on gender and sexuality. And maybe even just saying, like, you may not agree with this, you may not think that this is right, but it doesn't matter because we're being respectful to this person. Kind of emphasizing that. So if you think that it's going to be a political problem in your classroom, I think that I would probably encourage I wouldn't want the kid themselves to educate everybody else. That is a huge burden, and they probably would say no. So I wouldn't ask the kid to do it, but I think that there might be something that might necessitate a professional talking to them.
This has come up. The reason I asked that is because it's come up in my Spanish class, because Spanish is a gender-driven language. And so
Yes.
we've been able to talk about the Latinx movement and been able to discuss that. But that, that's why the pronoun thing is really important. And I like how you say to introduce with the norms, because otherwise, I'm still, let's see, 2/3 of the way through of Spanish 1, and we're barely getting to the point where we're figuring out, like, okay, I really do have to start placing gender to some of these things that are like non-living, like a table and a pencil and stuff. And so now it's like, oh, okay, well, how do I, from the kids' perspective, how do I address a they singular person, pronouns with Spanish
Spanish.
adjectives. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it's not just like the political, or like the social atmosphere, but it's also the grammatical and like content driven side of the content or language that we have to focus on.
Yeah, we're just about to wrap up. But yeah, a singular they is definitely a feature of the English language and definitely does not belong to every single language. So I admire that is a very difficult thing for gendered and like the Romance languages, the Latin-based languages. And I know that there might be some good information on like Reddit or other forums, like how do you as a Spanish person use uh they them pronouns in France or in Italy. Um, and yeah, it is definitely a difficult topic though, and something that I'm very grateful that I speak English and that we do have this part of our language. So, um, so just a reminder about the reflection paper. Um, the reflection paper topic is about identifying one way that you can be an ally to a student or to students who identify with the community outside of the perceived mainstream. So how can you be an ally to gay students or Mexican students or Native American students? So that's the topic for the reflection paper. Thank you guys all for participating. That was such a great discussion, and I really do appreciate hearing all of your thoughts. Please don't ever apologize for speaking. It really helps me. And you guys gave me some great things to add to the presentation for the next time I do this. So thank you guys.
Great job, Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.